What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Bearded Browns podcast. We got a hell of a show for you guys today, and we have a special guest that's normally on our Saturday show, Sam Lacavera. What is up, buddy? Thank you for joining us tonight. Chad, what's up with you, buddy? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Kind of scrambled here from work, and I'm ready to go.
Nice. Well, we're going to get right into it today. This show topic today is about the Guardrails show. It was leaked. Cleveland Browns Guardrails, set up by Paul Depodesta, leaked by Seth Wickersham, who was doing a report on the Browns. Paul Depodesta, quote, constantly questioned the efficacy of your belief system and trying to uncover value where it is not readily apparent, end quote. We're going to dive deep into what all this means tonight, and if any of it has come to fruition, who's to blame for things that did not work in this? Is it Jimmy and Dee Haslam, Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, or Paul himself? They have to show that this could possibly be the year that this whole situation here could be reevaluated and possibly work. So that's what we're looking forward to. Stay with us today, and we're going to explain this stuff to you. And if you like the show, follow and share. And that's it. Sam, that looks mighty amazing.
Oh, hang on. Hang on.
The Saturday show.
Close it out.
Okay. There we go. Wow.
There's a handsome way to drink, and that was it.
Yes.
There you go.
Chad did that. That's right. That's right.
Chad's got it nailed, man.
He's trying to hold his headphones on. You're right.
Heck yeah.
Hold.
So today, just so everybody know, today's show is sponsored by Doug White Allstate Insurance Agency. They're at 8020 Columbia Road in beautiful Olmsted Falls. Give them a call for all your insurance needs. Phone number is 440-235-8500. That's 440-235-8500. You guys ready to get into this? The Guardrails, were they derailed or what happened?
Some of them. I think people are going to agree some of them got derailed. But it's interesting. So this topic came about because I thought of it a long time ago, because this article from Seth Wickersham looking over the Browns organization under Jimmy Haslam actually came out like sometime in like maybe 2020, and he looked over the Browns from like 2014 to 2019 or something like that, like most of the Haslam era, and he was looking at like where have things gone wrong under Jimmy Haslam, and like where are the problems. And of course, towards the end of that article was around the time the Browns started going with that kind of building their analytic team. That's when we had, like, at one point, Sashi Brown was GM. We had, I can't think of the name of the guy that came from the Eagles also. And then Paul Depodesta was hired. And it was kind of like, then they got into Ray Farmer. Then Ray Farmer was gone. And there was just kind of this giant turnover. That was that era where he was essentially either firing the GM or the coach every single year. And it was like, we got Mike Pettin, and then we got Pat Shurmur, and it was like every year one GM's fired, then married to that coach, and then the next year that coach is fired. And I guess the big thing that came out of this was Paul Depodesta was eventually hired. And from what it sounded like from this article and at the time, he was sort of hired because that was what was happening. And they're like, we need like an organizational structure. Like basically the Haslams were like, this isn't like running our gas business. This is a totally different thing. We thought it would be easier. We don't really know how to set up. So he was brought in to kind of like build the analytics department, but also use some of that information to build the organization the way that successful teams have built an organization. And I've looked it up. There are a lot of other teams that are run similarly to how the Browns are run now. It's what we have now is closer to like what the Chiefs have, closer to the Titans, the Green Bay Packers, the Eagles. So it is close. And in this whole entire thing, this Guardrails thing that went crazy viral in Cleveland for, an entire summer was just basically an organizational like structure that Depodesta put on paper that got snapped in a picture by somebody and then got released. And I think it's almost been long forgotten. So I kind of thought like, it'll be fun. We'll bring it back. We'll go over them Depodesta has been here for years now. This is like basically his second large regime, and he's at the end of it. And so, like, let's look at what he put in place and whether they've stuck to it at all. And if they have, is it working? And if they haven't, is that part of the reason things aren't working? So that's the basic summary of like what this show will be.
All right.
Like James said, I trust so much coming from a guy that nobody knows what he does, and that's kind of what we're going to explain tonight. And it kind of gives you a somewhat of an idea of his ideology.
We also don't exactly know what he does, but we know he did this, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't. To me, for some reason, I always get the feeling when I hear Depodesta's name, I'm like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? It's like, you know where the guy's at, but what does this guy? Now that you found him, what does this guy actually do?
Yeah. By the way, he's out by me, and that pisses even more Clevelanders out. So
Right.
he lives in San Diego, and I constantly see like, what is this a-hole doing in San Diego that can help the Browns? And I'm like,
Right.
I don't know, man. Honestly, I don't know how much he's doing anymore, but like these guardrails and setting up the organization. So it was basically these guardrails, and then like, here's how a good organization is run. They have this guy as vice president of football operations, then they have the president, then under them the GM, and here's who should report to who. But all that is like, okay, that's great. The organization's set. They're going to hire that way. This is the ongoing thing that I think is important. So we should dive into this and let's kind of see, jump on. If anybody's out there listening and has a comment, like pop it in there and we'll go over it, because we're going to just go over these guardrails in each category and decide like, have they been following this or no? And which way should they be going?
Right. I'm gonna talk about them. I'm gonna pull up the actual screenshot that was taken, and you guys could go through it and we'll decipher the mess. So first we got talent acquisition and free agency. The first thing is don't pay for depth. Identify difference makers. Be cognizant of the scheme protection. Factor in leadership and toughness. Build your roster and use free agency less and less. Age is important. Age is important. That was the biggest one.
So some of these, like, as soon as you read them, like some of these are like, like they haven't stuck to these. So I think they started sticking to these. Like I remember when this group first came in with like Andrew Berry, and they started bringing in free agents and drafting. This was a big thing. They're like, oh, Andrew Berry likes younger guys in the draft, and like he's trying to get free agents that are like before they hit their second contract and like kind of blow up. He's trying to get guys after their first contract who have upside and all that stuff. But if you look at the roster now, like it's old. First of all, they've brought in quite a few old free agents lately, like their defensive line that they brought in, like Shelby Harris is pretty old. They just traded off Zadarius Smith, and that could kind of follow this, but like they brought him in, he was already pretty old. They brought in a couple old linebackers. Hicks is pretty old. So free agents, I think they have definitely faded off paying attention to age. And I mean, Deshaun Watson is going to come up so many times in this. I don't want the whole show to be about him, but they've had to build so much more of this roster using free agents in the last couple of years because they gave up 5 total picks, including 3 firsts to get Watson. So I'm sure they would like to stick to that part, but like they haven't. They brought in way too many free agents the last year or two.
Yeah, when I hear the age part, I'm as we're talking about this, I was thinking like that's why they brought in like the Landry, you know what I'm saying? The Jarvis, some skilled older players. Current right now for us that now he's gone would have been like, well, let's get an Amari Cooper here. We need a veteran receiver, help these young guys out type thing. So I kind of get that outline there, but we haven't, like you said, man. Has that really worked? I don't know. I actually thought bringing Jarvis in here as an age guy, he was getting up in his years, actually did help the Browns out in the wide receiver room. But I can kind of get that. But at the end of the day, I mean, proof's in the paper and on the pudding. So, I mean, what has it really done? So.
And my biggest thing out of all these is factor in leadership and toughness. We got to find guys that, excuse me, are veterans that could bring this locker room back to what it was, like you said, when Jarvis Landry was here. That's, I think, a big critical factor. James says they'll pay attention when guys start breaking hips.
Yeah, it's almost like what you guys have just described, though. Seeing that like age is important, in my head, I'm thinking like, oh, that means they probably want to make sure they keep a young roster, but it almost feels like they've had a pretty old roster. They've been getting older and older the farther they've been since these came out in 2017 or 18, or no, 2019, whenever this kind of got public. It feels like they've been getting older and older. Don't pay for depth. I think for the most part they haven't. When they sign free agents, they're not like bringing in high price free agents who aren't going to be starters.
Right.
They've gotten cheap guys like Devin Bush to come in. They've gotten some rotational guys. They look for a lot of like cheap redemption projects like Maurice Hurst in order to not spend a lot on the roster. They don't bring in free agent like backup linemen. They just draft them really late and they try to develop them. So I think they've stuck to that. Identifying difference makers, I think that's something they're sticking to. They just haven't been good enough at it. And I get the be cognizant of scheme production. Like, yeah, you don't want to just take somebody that's a running back who's been really productive for, I don't know, the Dolphins or somewhere that like has, or like, let's say the 49ers, because they can just kind of churn running backs and be tricked into the fact that they're not that good. They just have a great blocking scheme. So I think some of those they've stuck to, but like they have let this team get pretty old. And in the last couple of years, it's supposed to be build your roster and use free agents less and less. I think all of us could easily take a look and say they've used free agents more and more the last 2 or 3 years. It's not that they've signed like crazy high priced ones, but they've signed too many. They're constantly bringing in a bunch of free agents to fill holes, and they'll have to do it again this year because they've got
It seems
a
like
need for it.
it seems like when they do that, because like you said, they're not getting the high end price guys. It seems to me like, Chad, when they do that, it seems like it's because they're trying to fill that void in case this guy goes down. We got to make sure we have a half decent guy to plug in there. So
yeah. And some of that, like we said, some of that might have been, they didn't have 3 first-round draft picks. They gave up a second. They missed a third and a fourth. Like, yeah, those guys could all be somebody that is a rotational or starter for your team at this point. All the first rounders should have been. So yeah, maybe that's part of it, but like they need to get back to that philosophy of like, now that they have their draft picks, we need to draft and build that way and start fading out of counting on these 28-year-old guys to come in and help us. Like, it's good to have veterans. It's better to have ones that grew up in your system than it is to just bring guys in, because that transition year, you got guys like Juan Thornhill where like you lose his scheme fit and you lose like maybe some of his motivation once he signs that contract. So like you need your own guys, I think.
All right.
yeah.
We're going to move along to talent acquisition draft status.
This one's important right now.
Yes, I'm going to pull up the picture for you guys so you guys could read it with us. Do not draft red over a blue. Accumulate as many picks as possible, especially in the top 2 rounds. Accumulate future picks because of the high discount rate. Be mindful of position scarcity, and character and play data help build a profile. That's huge, man. Red over a blue. Obviously, there's red players that could be like, say, for example, when we signed, what's his name? Man, I just made a post about him. Kansas City Chief now, running back.
Hunt.
Kareem Hunt. That's a red because obviously he's got issues off the field. Blue players would be an elite player, a good player.
When you hear like draft blue chip players, and I think part of the point of this is like you might like this certain player, but if there's a blue chip player on the board at a different position, like don't pass up like a superstar player to like draft need or to draft just a good player at a different position.
So it's kind of like if the dude's got baggage or he's got sometimes you might have a shitty attitude, don't go for
I don't even think just red flags. I think it's more like red chip players are like pretty good players. Like blue chip players are like your studs. Like And I think the best example of this is like I think everybody has made it clear the Browns don't have a high grade on the position of linebacker. They don't value the linebackers like this is the highest importance position, but they couldn't pass up Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I think because they're like, well, we know we don't like drafting linebackers high, but this is a player, like right now we have a bunch of guys on our board that are second round grades. They're good, but we actually have him as like a elite player with a first round grade who's still available. It looked like they pivoted and they're like, I know we normally wouldn't take a linebacker in the top 2 rounds, but this kid's a blue chip player. We can't miss him, like regardless of position. So I think they're kind of doing that. Like they're prone to take their more important positions, which we'll get to later. But I think this was one they should stick to. If you see a player and he's a guard or he's a safety and you just think he's elite, I think you should maybe consider grabbing him, even if that's either not your position of need or the position you think is most important in the NFL. I don't know if we have a ton of examples of them doing it. The only one I can think of is JOK, where I think they were like, we can't pass this guy up.
So and what a great acquisition he was to the team, man. Like I still praying for JOK, man, have a good return. Of all else, man, I talked to these guys before about it. It's for me because you bring up JOK and he's one of my favorite players, but I bring him up just because I want him to be not even as a football aspect. I want him to come back. But if he can't do football, I still want the guy to be healthy. You know what I'm saying? Because like a lot of his stuff,
for sure, that was a devastating injury,
and it was left in question marks, man. I'm like, what's going on?
It still is.
Hey, bro.
We still don't really know all the details. He's seeing specialists. We talked about on one of those shows. All we know is he's just going around trying to find second opinions. So it's like it's such an unknown. But yeah, he's a favorite. I think I'm not a giant linebacker guy. I always like push back on Browns fans because they love linebacker, and I always think, I don't know, I'm happy grabbing a Devin Bush and a Hicks and like a Diabate, like these cheap free agents, later guys, and fill them in. They did great with Taki. They did good with Walker. Like they do pretty well just filling that spot in. But it works so well, I think, because JOK is incredible and they can fill in the blanks. And so like, yeah, so that's one of those things where it's like, if you got a stud somewhere, which I think they thought Grant Delpit was going to be that at safety. I think that's part of the reason they drafted him so high, because that's another position that most analytical-based teams don't have that high. He tore his Achilles before he ever played a snap, and I think that we'll never see the guy they thought they were getting. But that actually is another example where they probably just saw him and were like, dude, we got a first-round grade on this guy. I know he's a safety. We're taking him anyway. And they picked him pretty early in the second round. So, yeah, so I think that's one they're trying to stick to, it looks like. And I like that philosophy.
Yeah. Accumulating as many picks as possible, especially in the top 2 rounds. And we talked about that. Like in your normal draft, you got to pick at least 2 or 3 solid people. We have not really done that.
And then obviously we go back to Deshaun. Because of that Deshaun trade, they have, when they first start, so like when he first came in, that first group with Sashi Brown's, like that job of like tanking, trading away all your guys, they picked up a bunch of picks. That first year that John Dorsey had a draft, they had 2 first rounders, number 1 and number 4, and they had 2 second rounders, and that's where they got Garrett. They got Baker, they got Ward, they got Chubb, and I think the 4th one was Austin Corbett, who they cut like 2 years later. And the year before that, they got Garrett. And then I also think that was the year they did a trade back, either that year or the year before, and they ended up with guys like Njoku and like a whole pile of guys that so they were definitely doing that at one point, like trading back and grabbing more picks, especially early. They're still doing trade backs for getting more picks. Right now in this draft, what do they have? Like 11 picks. The problem is they're not especially in the top 2 rounds.
I think the Browns, since we haven't had a chance to have any draft picks because of the Deshaun Watson project, I definitely think there's no trade backs now. I think you go get the studs when you can get them and fire away.
Yeah. I could see people are still talking about trade backs, and I could see in the first round if you don't like the quarterback, yeah, I could see them being
I've been sitting
let's
here
go.
waiting to get a draft pick. I don't want to trade down for nobody.
I hear you.
Go get
I
your
hear you. But if
studs
they don't
and
like
get
the
'em.
quarterback, and you're like, I could see them being like, okay, we're at 2. Cam Ward, let's just pretend, was picked first. Maybe they're like, we actually don't love Shador, and like somebody else, Giants, Raiders are like, we'll give you next year's first round pick if you let us up. And you're like, let's see. That means we pick 6. We got 4 elite players on the board. We're definitely going to get one of them. I could see him doing it. I'm not rooting for it, but I could see that's about the only chance to do it because, like, in the second round, you got pick 33.
Right.
I feel like that's a pretty elite player. I would take that pick. They've been fudging around with their second round pick too often, where they either traded away or they trade down, or we've missed too many first and second round talents trying to get extra third rounders. And this year we already have 2 third rounders, like 5 sixth rounders. Like, we don't need any more late rounders. If you can't get your hands on first and seconds, you better stay put. So, like, I think this is one they need to stick to because they gave too many away.
Buckle it down and keep it full steam. Gas on the pedal, and let's go. Let's get the best of the best, man.
I do agree. You get a really, really big discount on future picks. Like, people are happy to be like, we'll give you this year's first and next year's second to like move up 2 spots. And like, that kind of feels like it stinks a little. And then the next year when you have, 38 and 45, it's like, hell yes, this is awesome. So you can get them at a discount. I don't think now is the time for that. I'm with you, Sam. I think now is. I won't throw a fuss if they do it because maybe they get great talent, and then they'll just give me more to look forward to.
It's got to be the gold pot at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, you can't miss. You for sure can't. You can't trade back and then be like, "Whoops, we didn't get somebody incredible." Like, you just cannot do that. And they've done that before. They've traded back, and they've skipped out of bad positions before, where the guy that is sitting there, per se, like, turned out like they traded out of the Carson Wentz pick, and people went nuts. Like, you need Carson Wentz, you need a quarterback, and 2 years later, they're like, "Ooh, thank God they got the extra first round for that, and they didn't take Carson Wentz." So, like, it can work, but like, you better be right, because if you're not,
And that's another thing that brings to the next point: be mindful of position scarcity. There are positions on this team that need filled, and it is a true feeling. We've watched it this year happen. As we all said, the line's getting old. There's a certain positions that need to be filled in this draft. And could it happen? Yes. Maybe.
And this
in
is
some
one
positions
people didn't love that
round.
pick. People didn't love that pick, but I fully think the reason they picked Greg Newsome was because they were like, there's like 5 cornerbacks in this draft that can help your team. This is the last one. We better take him over JOK, which they jumped up to get later. But I just felt like they were probably like, we better take him because we can't play without multiple cornerbacks. And like, there's not any in the second or third round that we think can help us. And so I think they picked him earlier. And at the time, it was a good pick. He's been injured too much. He hasn't gotten better. But like, I think that probably played a part in that pick, was like, there's just no corners in this draft, and we better get one while the getting's good. I think they came out and said so much. Is like, we had 5 cornerbacks with a first round grade and like nothing for a couple rounds after that. And so we took him when we had the chance. So,
Sam, you got anything to say on that?
No, man, not actually. No, I was just listening to Chad and feeding off Chad, feeling it. I heard what he's saying and what he's putting down on there too. I'm not a huge Newsome fan, but he's still got playability to me. I think he could be.
I don't think anybody should be. He's not. He honestly, he reminds me of like that. Not as bad, but similar to the Jed Wills pick. At the time you picked him, rated really good on most like boards, pretty unanimously like pretty good pick. And then after his rookie year, you're like, nailed it. And then somehow as the years went by, like, they're just 2 guys that didn't get better. Wills spiral out of control, but like, Newsome hasn't spiraled, but he just isn't much better than his first year.
I was expecting Newsome to mature a little more, and I don't think he's done that. He has not shown.
I just kind of thought, like, after both those guys, like, I watched their first year and I thought, oh, these guys are both good for rookies. Like, they're going to be great. And they just didn't get any better. Like, I don't know how that happens. Like, with like the position coaches, where other guys in those same positions, like, you can't blame the coaches really, because other guys in the line got better. Other guys in the cornerback room got better. Like, what happened to those guys? Like, what are they not doing?
Some of my Newsome stuff that made me feel the way I do now about him was just it's out there in plain sight, man. It's you're losing by 21 points. You just stopped a 4th down. All right. You barely did it. You got him by a shoestring, and it's this.
Yep.
Go sit your ass down.
They do a little bit dance. They do a little bit too much dancing.
Go sit down. Go sit down. If I was a coach out there, his ass, you would see me on the sideline chewing his ass out by his face mask.
I like it.
We're losing,
Sports
dude.
Likes it.
We're losing.
Sports likes it. I hate it. I don't like the dancing, and I'm not going to make a giant fuss about it, but I don't love it. And like, it's just our defensive backs, and I'd feel better about it if they were better. But
they'd be better on Broadway. You know what I'm saying? You know, with the skirts out, with the legs up. I mean, come on, man, knock it off, man. You're losing the game. Get your head in there and quit the bullshit, man. That's me.
And then the last one is the one that cracks me up the most for drafting. Character, play, and data help build a profile, which is the easiest thing ever to be like, okay, we should be looking at this guy's tape, see how he plays. We should be looking at the data and advanced analytics to see, like, do these types of guys succeed? Is he putting up the right numbers in college that carry over, or is he doing stuff that's not repeatable? Are the better teams drafting these kind of guys? And then the last part is character, which has to make you crack up when you see them draft guys like Perion Winfrey.
Oh man!
Like, I mean, does anybody in the NFL have more of a current stigma around bringing in guys with bad character? We used to talk about the Ravens did it, the Steelers did it, the Bengals were basically known for bringing in guys that were wearing, prison jumpsuits at one point. But right now, Andrew Berry brings in as many questionable character guys as any team I can think of. They got Perion Winfrey. They had the dude who I can't think of, Malik McDowell, the dude that got like caught by the police running around naked on whatever he was on. They just brought in Kadarius Toney, who everybody's like, this guy is
that blew my mind. I go, like, why? You don't need that. That position, you didn't need nothing. Okay? Yeah. Because at that point in time, we couldn't get the ball out to save our life. I didn't care if Tom Brady was throwing the ball to Jerry Rice in his prime. Okay? And they're like, Kadarius Toney. I'm like, what a waste of oxygen.
And he loves it. He loves redemption. He loves first round failed redemption projects, which is why I'm so annoyed.
And you know what?
It
showed when he was in the game.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Back up off your mic, Sam.
What did I do? What did I do?
Got excited.
What did I do?
Yeah, character seems like a giant Browns concern, and I think it's funny that's like a major guardrail. Like, pick guys with character, and you're like, nah.
He was. That was me doing this when they said they brought him here. I'm like, what?
Now it's less in the draft. The only guy I can think of right off the top of my head in the draft that had like a major character issue where people were talking was Perion Winfrey, and people were like, like we talked about Mike Hall got into some trouble, but I didn't hear anything pre-draft that he had issues that just came out later. And I didn't hear anything about Jed Wills, like, oh, he's like a little bit like lackadaisical about his like training. Like, none of that stuff I ever heard. The one person I could think of where I heard like he's going to drop because there's stuff going on was Winfrey. But in free agency, which isn't necessarily what this section is about, they bring in a ton of character guys. And I think it's just weird that they're like, don't draft any bad character guys. But if they're free agents, just scoop them up. Who cares if they're cheap enough? I don't think we have the culture to support that yet. Maybe someday.
All right, let's move on to talent retention. Churn the bottom of the roster, which we clearly have not seemed to have done, but play young guys to know what you have. Another thing we have not seen.
We saw that this year, I think.
Identify and play early. It goes with the play young guys, but make this a great place for players. How do you do that? Like you churn the bottom of the roster, which we've done a couple times. Not too hardcore.
They bring in a bunch of 5th, 6th, 7th rounders. They play them. They take guys from the practice squad on, then off, then on. They get guys a chance. So I can see that. Yeah, they do they do get the bottom 10 guys in the roster like in, and then the next year if they're not good, like they just cut those guys and they bring in new. So they kind of do that just to see, like, do we find somebody?
Play young guys that know what you have. Where the hell is Jamari Thrash? There's certain people that we drafted last year.
Well, he got in later. I mean, he eventually got in.
Right, but we're looking forward to seeing these guys and what they're capable of doing, because this is what we're looking forward to. This is what we had to look forward to. Future draft picks are a thing.
Let me interject real quick. I do agree with you, Mike, there, because like you said, Jamari Thrash. I mean, our season was pretty much. I already told you, man. Our season was in the toilet to me when we hit that. Went out and did that Raiders. We had to go play. Where's the schedule at? I knew we were already in peril, man, when we went and we headed out on the road, and it was Raiders, Washington, Eagles, and. Yeah, okay, they're not division teams, but I'm like, if we don't go out there and win at least one of those, we are in trouble. So, and with, Watson going out and all that, I was like, yeah, where's the young talent? Why aren't we not seeing these guys? Yeah. I mean, we're building them up. Let them go play, because right now this season is dust to the wind. Yeah. Let me see some Jamari. Let's see what
I would say to be devil's advocate a little bit, though, I do think like part of the reason that they were so quick to boot Coop out the door for a 3rd round pick is because they're like, oh, well, we'll throw in more. We'll get more reps to
Tillman.
David Bell and Tillman. And Bell, of course, went down right away, but they're like, we'll just throw in Tillman. Like, if Cooper's not like doing what we need him to do, we'll boot him. We'll throw in the 2nd-year guy. Tillman got reps last year. Thrash didn't get as much as we wanted. One of my excuses for him, though, is by the time they started bringing him in and Mike Woods and they started giving them reps, they had already moved on from all the good quarterbacks. And they should have gotten both of those guys in the mix while Winston was still slinging the ball. Because if they were going to bring him in and then play DTR and Zappy for the next 3-4 games, like, come on, guys, they're not going to get the ball to these guys. We're not going to see anything out of them. So I agree with you. If they were going to like try to see them, they should have seen them under Winston. But
right. And off topic real quick, I like to touch base on Amari. I don't think Amari really wanted to be here. I think going into this season, he already knew it was about to be dog shit.
He wanted that extension so bad. And
I already think he knew it was going to be a dog shit season. Yeah. And as soon as it started, it turned into that, and he was like, "Man, what?" I think somebody probably talked to him and said, "Hey, man, I'll get you a better deal. You just got to hold tight. Hold tight. We'll get you that deal."
Could have been Barry. And we said that he sat out because he wanted like, I want my guarantee. Like, I want the money ahead of time. I don't want to like play it through the season. I have no guarantees. So they guaranteed the money. And honestly, in the end game, that just made them get a higher draft pick for him. Like, I wasn't happy with that at the time. I was like, why are you guaranteeing a 30-year-old guy anything? Like, he better go out there and play, and he didn't. As soon as he got the money, like we talked about earlier, he stopped performing. But to finish off your point, like, essentially, yeah, he looked like he was 1 foot out the door, and they just let him walk. Like, okay, fine. If you're not going to take this seriously, we'll throw Tillman in, and he can do what you do easily. And he kind of did. Again, this draft, we might feel pretty good about that because even though it's a late 3rd rounder, we got 1 extra 3rd rounder out of the Bills, and they've gotten almost nothing out of Cooper.
No, they haven't. And they haven't. And they haven't got much out of him.
I'm sure he wanted to play there, but he already got his guaranteed money. He's getting older. Like, what's his motivation now? Like, take the ride.
That double ARP card.
That sounds like another guy, but I don't want to get into that topic.
Yeah, we're gonna make this a great place for players. And I'm not going to say that we don't. We do that. We make sure they're all taken care of. But at the same time, this staff has to make sure that these players are taken care of and happy in here. It's so hard to explain.
I don't think there's much more to say about that than that. Like, I think you're spot on. Like, I think they've made it a pretty good place to play. They don't make the players miserable. It's a player-friendly system. They make sure you get paid. They do favors for you. Like Nick Chubb was talking about how like they stuck by him. They changed his contract so that they didn't have to cut him, like things like that. But let's be honest, the thing that would make this the greatest place for the players is more years like 2023. And they need to find that. Like, internally, the players, I think most of them are okay playing here, but you got to make it a place that outside players recognize that's a place I would like to go and play, and that's the job they still haven't done.
Right.
That's tough, man, because you got to look at our lineage
Long
since
history.
'99. You know, it's like,
Yeah, long history.
Do I really want to go to Cleveland? Hey, man, they take care of you. They'll feed you good. They'll roll out a red carpet for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I always say too, a lot of guys at the end of the day, it's about getting a Super Bowl. You know,
Yeah.
and if you're not showing that you want to be part of that, a lot of guys are not going to want to come here. You might see a guy in the draft go, and our next pick, the Cleveland Browns take Shedeur Sanders. He's gonna be like this. Daddy, make the call, Daddy. Call somebody, Daddy. All right, go ahead, guys.
No, you're good, dude. I appreciate that.
I swear, if you see Shedeur Sanders, I don't think we're gonna see a. I think we're gonna see a.
He's pretty savvy. He's pretty savvy. He'll fake it.
I thought my dad had this worked out.
Yeah, I think he's smart enough to fake it. He'll be like, "Yay!"
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Right. I'm with you on that.
That moves us
Put that
on
helmet
to
down, look down.
right. That moves us on to key positions and communication. Back when this was stolen, I'm gonna go with that word. We were looking for quarterback, cornerbacks, pass rushers, and offensive tackles. Some of those positions are still.
This is what they're calling the key positions. Those 4 positions. And actually, I was most curious from you guys. Like, we can go through all 5 of these guardrails, but then my big question for you guys to think about as we go through is, do you agree that those are like the 4 key positions?
Quarterback, yes. Quarterback, yes. Cornerback, man. Pass rushers, I would like somebody else. An offensive tackle, yeah.
We talked about it, and I wasn't about it. And Chad, you kind of talked about it. At this stage in the game, I think you need to find you a strong linebacker. We are kind of
like I said, we
are kind of in limbo right now.
Right.
With JOK, man, you know, I'm praying for him.
I just think this is more of like as a generalization, like you're starting your franchise, you get the first 4 picks in the draft, like or you get the first 4 free agent choices or whatever. This is more of a like, what are the 4 things you think are the most important? And I don't know if I think these are the 4 that I could get on board with. These are the 4 most important. But I also think in today's day and age, a disruptive defensive tackle and a go-to like absolute lock wide receiver, I think you could make the argument are just as important, because when you look at championship teams, almost all of like the major playoff teams have at least one, if not both of those. Maybe not all of them. So I guess that's the case, but I just think like the teams that win their like conferences often have like some sort of, maybe the reason the defensive line's not on there is maybe you don't need one star defensive lineman. Maybe if you have a couple good defensive linemen, you're fine, or like a very good overall room. But like the only place I disagree is I just think there's probably more elite positions than just those 4.
No, most definitely, dude. And what you're saying there with the wide receiver too, man, I definitely I can see that being more of a pick, you know. So quarterback for me, a tackle better get you some beef. Got to block that new quarterback up. So those 2 for me for sure. And yeah, I would say wide receiver. I'm on deck with you on that, like wide receiver for sure.
It's kind of an interesting talk this year, because like it makes you think like, okay, they are understanding quarterback so important, and they've got the 2nd pick in the draft. And when we talk about them trading back, the question be like, is there another elite position here that they would still be able to get their hands on? And I think this guardrail, whether or not they're right or not, this guardrail, if they follow it, would tell you like they probably wouldn't trade back unless there's somebody they can nab who fills an elite spot.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure now. I mean, like you said, how long ago did this guardrail get leaked?
2020.
Like
20.
2019, I think, or something
Right.
like that.
Right. I'm sure that you guys remember Inspector Gadget cartoon. You know. Well, hang
I
on,
do,
because
yeah.
at the end of every show, they're like, "This message will self-destruct." I'm sure that guardrail's been blown up already, and it's totally different. I am almost positive. You'll get me next. I'll get you next time, Gadget. This message will self-destruct. So, but like Mike shot this to me, and it wasn't my part of my knowledge because wasn't paying attention to this, 4 years ago. But first thing I said to Mike Chad, I go, "So this is the guy that made the Denny's menu? Because this shit look like a Denny's menu right here."
Well,
You know what I'm
it's
saying?
color coded. It's color coded. It's
Right.
Color coded. He's trying. I see a moons over my hammy on it. I like that extra bacon. I'm with that. No, I'm
Like
with you.
I see you wrote a side note next to the next guardrail for key positions.
Quarterback. Our goal was to keep investing in the quarterback, and right next to it, I put shit with about 5 exclamation points.
So they definitely did. They definitely did keep investing.
They
They
sure
invested
did.
everything in that position.
They're like, how many red carpets we gonna need? We're gonna need enough red carpets for the next 3 years.
They brought in countless free agents. They've drafted multiple. They gave up all those picks for Watson. Like, this is the guardrail where I just feel like it's on there and it's probably right. And we've been saying since like 2002, when it looked like Tim Couch wasn't going to be the answer, we've been saying every year, you need a quarterback. You need a quarterback. The depressing part is they have invested in that position multiple times, and we're currently sitting here years into Paul Depodesta creating these guidelines, and we do not have a franchise quarterback on our roster. Like, and you almost like, oh, they brought in Baker. They knew the quarterback was important. They started that draft. They grabbed a quarterback. Then they tried to keep investing by upgrading the quarterback to Watson, and it absolutely could not have backfired farther. But if there's one thing we'll say, they definitely stuck to this guardrail because they have not stopped trying to find a quarterback, at least.
And the rest, we got weekly organized football meetings, work together, and no uncoordinated leaks like this guardrail.
Like this particular guardrail,
Right.
which, by the way, maybe that was a coordinated leak. Like, there has been a lot of talk around the Browns that when something comes out, they wanted you to know it, because if you get caught leaking stuff to the media, like, you're going to fire. A big thing that they talked about Stump Mitchell is like he wouldn't stop talking to people, and it was a problem.
And I like Stump, man. And some of that, I mean, we're about to get to these other topics because what you just said there, Mike, some of that goes under pretty much keep things quiet and, do not silo type. So it kind of falls.
It is annoying. Like the weekly organized meetings, some people are annoyed with because they don't want people are like, I just think some of these guys like Depodesta has them are too involved, but they've decided like everyone should get together. We should all be talking. How many times do they say in the last like few years, this is a collaborative choice. Like, everything we've been doing, especially around Watson and all and some of these other big decisions, were collaborative. We all got on board first, and like it was wrong, but again, they're following the guardrail. It's just not working. What I will say is, for this one particularly, there are several times we've heard in the last couple of years, Haslam decided this, and he did it. And I think, like the Johnny Manziel thing, I don't know how much more it could have been reported. Somebody told him to get Johnny. He wanted Johnny. The OC at the time, or the quarterback's coach, was like, can we get Johnny? He went and got Johnny. He's like, he overruled his GM to get that guy. And he's done that several times. And I just think it's funny that this is on there, like, work together. But there's so many accounts where people are like, Haslam just did that on his own. He didn't do what was recommended. He just did his own thing.
So before we move on here, today's show is also sponsored by beardgains.com. Go there. If you guys want beards like ours, nice and gray and all that and oily and fun stuff, they're great. Honestly, their product's great. Use our code BeardedBrowns for 10% off at checkout. And if you order more than $35, you get free shipping. Can't beat that. Great product. I will never use anything else. I'm not kidding. Like, I just ordered a beard oil, and out in my mailbox frozen right now, but I will go and get that.
It's thawing out for the next couple of days, Mike. Go get your mail.
Yeah, I know, right? We're 40 degrees today here in LaGrange.
Yeah. Walked out with a T-shirt today. I'm like, wow, this is not
it's
bad.
a warm front.
Jen said, "Do they
The
sell
warm front over
brown
there.
gravy number 9?"
That's hair dye, babe, and I don't do none of that. I'm all gray, man.
Oh man!
I always say I'm going straight George Clooney. I ain't doing none of that stuff to mine. That's just how I get.
So we're gonna get into
Brown
coaching.
gravy number 9.
Coaching. Allow coaches to coach. Remove management burdens, and have a coordinator pipeline. I'm going to bring up competitive advantages as well right now. Analytics, big data and odds, psychology and information gathering, sports science, and do not silo. So, allowing coaches to
These ones
coach.
are interesting.
Allowing coaches to coach. Allowing coaches to coach, gentlemen. Remove management burdens.
How much have we talked about on just these off-season shows, how much we felt Kevin got kind of screwed by the fact that the organization wanted changes in coaching to suit Deshaun Watson. And I cannot imagine like somebody that's a Browns fan seeing this particular allow coaches to coach, remove management burdens. And again, these were stuff Depodesta put in place probably because of problems that Haslam and the organization had in the past when they were GMs are calling down to the sidelines when like the Brian Hoyer Johnny days and be like, we want to see Johnny, put in Johnny. Like, you can't have that. The problem is this still happens. I fully believe that even though Kevin has taken responsibility of like, I was the one that interviewed and hired Dorsey, I don't think anybody believes that he ever really wanted to fire a VP and he really wanted to go like a very different direction. That was very much we need to do something that works for Deshaun, and we have to have somebody in the building that has worked with like a different kind of quarterback. And I look at this as like they didn't really allow the coaches to coach. They sort of directed how it should be done. And I think it backfired.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say that after Deshaun Watson came here and they saw what a hellfire this organization was going to be with Deshaun Watson here, making his own shit up, essentially, I think that the coordinators and everybody's like, I don't want out of this. I don't want no part of this. This is going to make my record look bad because this dude's horrible. That's my outlook on that. And obviously, as Stefanski, you have no choice but to deal with this guy. You have to deal with Deshaun Watson. You got to play him. You got to figure out how to make this guy playable, and it just didn't work. So all these other guys that have a chance to go out and become more than an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator or tight ends coach were like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not dealing with this. This guy's an asshole. I'm done.
It's a good thing they had Dorsey to do. He was the chopping block for that, because I think, because you talked about it earlier in the season, Mike, like, why isn't this guy up in the booth like every other NFL offensive coordinator? And I was like, I was kind of mystified too with you. I'm like, yeah, he should be up there. You need that eagle vision, see what's going on. Well, they did that. That wasn't working. Like, I really, feeling how I'm feeling now, I feel like this season was in peril before it started within the organization.
I did.
Okay.
Well, I'm not to interrupt you. I did when I went to the Dallas game, the home opener, and seen the stadium covered in white Dallas jerseys and people chanting DTR. That's when I knew like we're in trouble.
That was such a joke. I mean, I feel like I made it pretty clear. Like, I thought the Browns, I still expected higher, but I thought the Browns were the only one that, like, in my whole circle of like friends, Browns backers, other people, kind of thought the Browns were like a single-digit win team this year. And I think most people had them at double-digit wins. So I would agree. I also thought they were in a little bit of trouble, not this bad of trouble, but I don't know. I guess it's between like allowing the coaches to coach. I think you're seeing that both of these, I think this year is a like refreshing shift to that. It sounds like Stefanski is going to be like taking charge of who coaches. The one after that is have a coordinator pipeline. They finally kind of do because they hired from within. They hired their tight ends coach to be their offensive coordinator, and we know other people were interested both in college and other programs like New England were considering interviewing him for offensive coordinator too. So for the first time, we kind of have a coordinator pipeline. We also just hired within a quarterbacks coach who was an offensive assistant
Right. Yeah.
last year. So
Yep. I
so
just seen.
finally it is like, okay, they do have a coordinator pipeline. They're hiring from within, which is what they want to do. So for people that are like out there, like, I thought they should have brought in this guy or that guy. I mean, their own internal processes to try to keep guys in their system. So
And that comes with like anything, man. You have to kind of keep an internal. You need some internal mechanisms to have it all work. So, I mean, I like that they're actually giving these guys an opportunity. They're upgrading. So, and you're keeping it within your system. And and some of these guys are comfortable. They know Kevin. They've been around Kevin, and they're building up from within. I'm totally on board with that, Chad, right there. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think there's been some other examples too, but like for the most part, like I think that this is a year that you can finally point to and just say that, like, yeah, they're allowing the coaches to coach. They have a coordinator pipeline, and I don't think this is the only year. I think Stefanski's first. I think 2020 and 2021, they were like, "Do your thing, do you,"
Mhm.
and so I think they're kind of back to that. Um, yeah, and then and the other thing is like they have some other young line coaches and some other people have moved on. Like Callie Bronson moved on to she's running Team USA football now. So like it didn't work out the way they wanted, but like it was obvious they brought in somebody they thought was smart. Other people thought so too because they pulled her to do something else, or else she probably would still be moving up this organization.
No, right,
But
right,
so
and congratulations to her, man, on that achievement.
yeah,
That was pretty good when I
big
saw that.
deal.
I'm like, oh, that's good, man. It's
Big
hey,
deal.
hey, hey, we got that going on. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
we can
I'm
move
back.
we can move management up.
So we're just jumping into competitive advantages now, Mike, and it's everybody's favorite is the first guardrail on here, and it's analytics, big data, and odds. And I don't hate it.
I'll be
I
right
like
back.
analytics. Most other people, I think, especially Browns fans, hate this one. But I posted something earlier this year and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it was like the NFL.com released like the 10 teams with the biggest analytic departments, and the Philadelphia Eagles were on there. The Detroit Lions were on there. The Baltimore Ravens were on there. Obviously, we were on there. And like when we went through them, it was mostly pretty good teams, not universally. Jacksonville was on there. Their team stinks, and the Cowboys are consistently mid, and they were on there. But when I looked at it, I was like, I actually feel a little better about this. Packers, Eagles, Lions, Ravens, like those
Elite
are
teams.
teams where I'm like, okay, they're consistently competing. They draft well. They do smart things. Like that made me feel a little better. I think the problem is, and why fans have a problem with it is like what you read much earlier in the higher guardrail. That is when you're evaluating a player, you got to look at the data. You got to look at their um, whether they have flags or not, and how they fit, and you have to look at their play. And I think fans are always a little nervous that they're looking too much at the data and they're not looking at everything else. So you gotta have the balance. I think the smart teams are using analytics, but like the Browns do have the biggest department. And until they kind of show teams that they're grabbing football guys to do football things, and I've said they've gone against it. Like obviously, analytically, you don't take a linebacker in the second round. That's just not an analytical pick. And we talked about earlier, they took JOK. Like you,
Should have never took a kicker either, but they did that, didn't they?
yeah, and I would say analytics probably told you that's
It's
one where they
like,
probably
come
went off
on,
of
bro.
this, and they shouldn't have. Analytics would probably tell you statistically, you have just as good of a chance to get a franchise kicker without drafting him at all as you do drafting him anywhere in the draft. And they're not any better in the fourth round, second round than the seventh. So that's what it felt like they went off of analytics. And maybe that was not the right time.
When they drafted a kicker, bro, I was like,
I hated
what
that pick.
are you
in the
doing?
4th round, it still
What are
was
you
like
doing?
upsetting. I'm like, why?
I have a
did
lot
we
of
just
friends
do
that loved that pick and stuck to that pick for years. I hated that pick.
Yeah,
I'll be right back, gents. I'll be right back.
So this sports science one too, I didn't dive too much into that. I think that's just like, look at like more advanced analytics. Look at like, okay, if a guy has this throwing speed, does that actually help him be a better quarterback, or do the numbers show that these guys with this arm versus these guys with this arm both do good? That's not that important. Some people forget analytics isn't just about like numbers, like, oh, analytics like would tell you pick a quarterback that's 6'5", 240 pounds. But I don't think that's the point of analytics. I think more the point is take all the numbers of quarterbacks that are that size, then take the number of all the most successful quarterbacks of the last 10 years and find out, is that size actually fit them, or does it not match anymore? And if you were to look at it, you'd be like, well, Russell Wilson's was pretty outstanding for a while. Drew Brees was outstanding for a while. Right now, Baker Mayfield's playing well. Like, there's a lot of guys that no longer fit that mold that are good.
Right.
So there's times where the analytics will tell you, like, don't do the stereotype. Like, it doesn't actually correlate to success. So yeah, hopefully they balance it. We'll never know the ins and outs of it, but
let's move this along. Do not silo. Silo meaning be a collaborative effort in all forms of a team. You don't hide something and say, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to tell you guys what we're not going to do. It's a whole collaborative effort as a team. That's what you do.
This one doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I think
they all know that.
I do think like there's such a thing as oversharing and over collaborating, but for the most part, this team has had so many problems with general managers not agreeing or getting along with the head coach, and head coaches wanting one thing while the GM wants another, or like the offense wanting to do one thing while the defense wants another. And I think these days they actually do a pretty good job of being like, you guys all work together and figure it out. Like Stefanski's got to be in all the rooms. They open it up to players to be able to like give their input. So we're not actually in the building, but like they've been on Hard Knocks. Like I think most people looking from the outside would say the Browns are definitely not siloing. They definitely don't like get in a bubble and stop taking in collaborative information. They almost have collaborated a little too much, but it only feels that way because their biggest collaboration went terribly wrong.
All right, let's. You got anything, Sam?
No, I was just gonna speak on the Hard Knocks. Like, I was interested. I'm like, oh man, AFC North Hard Knocks, and then the way the season started going, I'm like, I don't even want to watch it yet. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna wait for all this to be done, then I'm gonna watch it.
That's what Chad's doing.
And then I'm gonna let it. I have not watched one episode. I still
let it simmer.
I'm
letting it simmer. I'm letting football get out of my system, and then like closer to the draft, I'll probably go and be like, I'm just going to binge watch all these episodes and see like what was happening and how should I be feeling about them now.
Right. So, all right. So we're on that. We're on the same page on that one. Cause I said, I have not watched one episode, and as diehard as a Browns fan I am, when I heard it was going to be AFC North on there, I'm like, man, let's get it. And I'm like, wait a minute, man. We're in the basement. I don't want to hear none of this until this all unfolds, bro.
Yeah.
So
too much covering this, and then also having to watch the games and then watch like recaps. Like I could.
Right.
They're tanking.
It's only
I am not trying to put myself through this extra emotion right now. I'm just not even gonna do it.
All right. Hey guys, we got 2 more sections. Basically, one on the salary cap, kind of boring, but we'll go over it. And then learning, and those are the last 2 guardrails.
I'm just going to mention them all right now. I'll pop it up again, and I'll talk about these. For salary cap, maintain flexibility as long as possible, at least until veteran franchise quarterback. Be able to exit after 2 years with no dead money, but in no event more than 3 years. Be creative ahead of the curve in contract structuring, which I think we've done pretty good with Andrew Berry so far, but we're going to get into that. The learning, evaluate ourselves constantly, create our own data and compile while we are creating, and learn from other sport organizations. The biggest one I want to really hit on this one is be able to exit this after 2 years with no dead money, and obviously that's been a deal for the last
Breathe,
5
man.
years.
Go ahead, breathe, bro. Y'all can breathe now. We are
Chaz
all
got a
allowed
vein
to
popping
breathe
out of
now.
his head.
All I can think of, like, this is so maddening because, like, how many of these have we gone through where the biggest shift or mistake that they've had on like so many of these guardrails ends in the name Watson? Like, they can't get out of his salary. They're not flexible with him. But like you read at the end, like, maintain your flexibility as long as you can, except for with a veteran franchise quarterback. And so, like, they went off of this structure because they're like, except for in the case of a quarterback, you can go off of this to get that quarterback. And it just makes me so mad that, like, that worked out so poorly, because basically that's the only there's little things, but that's like the major thing on all these guardrails, that like some of it getting Deshaun fit, one or two things like didn't, but the biggest thing is it didn't work. And so even the things where it followed the guardrails, it has totally screwed them.
I'll tell you what's probably on the new guardrail. All right. And that's no more guaranteed money to anybody.
Probably
Done.
I think
not
we
like
all know
that. Not like that again. I think the whole NFL, people were joking about
There
the
is
Browns
no way.
being-
Nobody can look at this contract and go, "Hey, that was a great idea," because it's not.
People were so mad, like the NFL is so mad at the Browns because now
They'd be
they're
like, "Hey,"
guaranteed that
they'd be like, "Hey,
it's going to
man.
be the new standard."
Hey,
and
man.
It's not going to be the new standard because everybody who just watched it go to crap.
Jesus
no
Christ
team's
wants
ever
to
gonna
be,
do this.
Jesus wants to be your quarterback, and he's guaranteed money. No. No and no. No more guaranteed
Yeah.
money. That burned us, man. That burned us so bad, and we are still here.
If they hadn't pulled off that trade, it would have burned them with Amari. It definitely burned them with Watson. But again, it follows this. Like, they're basically saying maintain flexibility, be creative with the cap. They've done that. Stay ahead of the curve with contract structuring. They might be better at that than any team in the league, and be able to exit 2 years with no dead money. They've been on all of this. Maintain your flexibility, except for with a franchise quarterback. They've been on this with everything except for, like, again, the Watson thing burned them with all their cap flexibility, but they've still found ways in the last year or two, even with that crazy guaranteed Watson money, to still sign players, make trades, bring in free agents. So, like, they're nailing the salary cap thing. It's going to be incredible to see how many guys they'll be able to bring in and refresh once that Watson cap is over.
This regime has learned a valuable lesson, the hardest way you can learn one, without a doubt. So, as a fan, and I'm not a season ticket holder. I'm not that guy, but as a fan, let's get it more forward, more straight, line up the stuff the way it's supposed to be, and let it lay down how it's going to go down, man. Because we don't need no more red carpets, man. I mean, Deshaun got the red carpet treatment, the guaranteed money, and we're out of draft picks.
Pick his play. We
could have, and everybody built around him, but not everybody was, player wise, not everybody was feeling that.
Sam,
and then they were stuck with it.
I don't want to interrupt, but James Frank says only quarterback that can fix this is Jesus Howard Christ.
Jesus.
Hey, you know what?
Climbing up the draft boards.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Draft two of them. Draft two quarterbacks.
Hey, when we're talking, I mean, we went over key positions.
Same,
quarterback,
James.
the number one key position. Number two, keep investing in the quarterback. Keep investing on the quarterback. I wouldn't be shocked if they brought in a free agent and draft
sixth round.
Grab
If they're following these guardrails, then they would.
I agree. Bridge and draft. I think this year we're going to be more creative ahead of the curve in contract structuring. That's one thing I'll give Andrew Berry. Andrew Berry is a smart man when it comes to structuring contracts. We watched it happen the last 3 years. I'm hoping it could happen more this year. There's a lot of hopes this year. And going into this year, like every other year, I have these high hopes as a Browns fan. Last year, not so much, to be honest. But this year, I'm going to go in with a little bit of hope. I'm going to do that.
I mean, it's got to get better from here.
I mean, you can't go anywhere else. You got to go up from here, right?
Right. without like I said, without us burning down the town and starting over again. We're
Right.
already at that point. Okay.
Nah, we can't
So
be because Myles Garrett will roll out apparently because these
well,
fans are delusional as well.
well, that's a whole nother. Hey, we could do a whole show on that.
Right,
so.
right. Let's talk about evaluating ourselves constantly, which I think we've done. I think we've done
I
that.
think they're doing it.
Yes, that happens week in and week out. Everybody's evaluated, and that's not going to
I
be
would
something
say-
that's going to change.
To add to this, they should evaluate themselves constantly, but also they need to make sure they are learning from that. Like they should be evaluating themselves and identifying their mistakes, but they also need to be constantly learning from their mistakes and the things that they made mistakes on, whichever guardrail they kind of ventured from or made a mistake, or whichever kind of guardrail they found this isn't useful. They need to make that change, and they need to actually stick to, okay, we found this isn't working. Now we have to go this direction. And I think it's still to be determined whether they've done that. They've made a lot of mistakes. They've learned from some, but like that's a huge one that they have to evaluate themselves, and then they have to pivot and stick to the better plan.
I mean, because like a lot of it's been bumper rails. You know what I'm saying? Some of that stuff's been boop 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 boop. But you got like you said, you gotta maintain. You have to maintain a direction. All right. And
Yep.
some of the old guardrails, so this was this 2019, 2020 thing. Still, I agree with. Still, some of the stuff I don't, and I go, oh, therein lies your problem. It was in this paper. It was in this Denny's menu to start with. But I roof. I'm not a coach. I'm not a player. So I'm just an observant.
Couch coach.
I'm an observant fan. I've been an observant fan since 1976, and when I was in my mother's womb, there was probably a game on. So I was born and raised into it, man. I just want to see it get. It's time to move forward now. Let's get the season's over. I'm very curious to see what goes on. Chad, Mike, this draft is pivotal. It's very pivotal for me.
Oh yeah.
Just like hang on. Just like this season that started, this was my make or break for Deshaun. And now let's say he didn't have an Achilles injury, but he played shitty the whole season. Gone. Okay? Because this was that year for me with him and this.
Yeah.
I was not on deck when they said that this was going to be who we're getting. This is what we're getting for that. I was not on deck with it. I'll stand in that grave today, tomorrow, for the rest of my life. I was not on the Deshaun Watson thing, and it didn't turn out to be great. It didn't turn out to be bad. You know what it turned out to be? Nothing. That's the worst.
Yeah.
The toughest thing, like we already mentioned with Deshaun, is that their guardrails under key positions and talent acquisition, and the one that we just went over with the salary cap is basically summarized into one thing: is get a quarterback, invest in the quarterback, find more quarterbacks, quarterback, and it's such a unfortunate thing for the organization and especially for the fans, because a lot of people like you and me weren't actually on board with that particular quarterback, that we're the ones that had to sit through that. And actually, Mike and I think agrees that we kind of predicted this season that even, no matter how he played, as long as he made it through the season, he probably would be back. It's almost, if you weren't on board with him or don't think he'll ever recover and become good again, like it's almost a blessing in disguise that he had that double Achilles tear, because there's a good chance he'll just never play again. Otherwise, you might have been stuck with him.
I hope.
Now you can at least move on.
Like, when that Deshaun Watson trade went down, the last time I thought about this for a quarterback is when they said Browns take Johnny Money Manziel. I went, he's already doing this before he even gets his hat or his jersey. Gonna be a problem. Said it, bam, nailed it. I'm like, you better sit down. Oh, that's me, baby. I'm Johnny Man. I'm like, that's gonna
hated
be
that pick too. I've been wrong on plenty of quarterbacks, but I hated him.
That's gonna be a flop. And I told my friends are like, bro, he's good. When he gets a chance, he probably won't play for the first year. They'll put him in.
Oh, yeah.
No, he didn't do jack. He was too much this. He had a lot of maturing to do, and he couldn't do it here in Cleveland.
Haslam made sure he played.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
And I wake up and Fox 8 News is our news over here, and like Johnny Manziel was in an Avon Lake police cars. I'm like, that does not surprise me, not one bit, not one bit.
We lost Kyle Shanahan for that kid.
Yeah.
We had Kyle Shanahan in the building, and he asked himself out of that contract just for that kid.
He was probably in his handcuffs. They probably put the handcuffs in front of him. He was like, I'm like, this kid is a joke. And
so they have learned. They have learned from other sports organizations. I don't know if they're actually doing that. I know they interact with them. I don't know if I have no way of knowing if they're actually doing anything related to baseball or not. And create their own data and compile what they're creating. That I'm sure they're doing, but we'll never find that. I kind of wanted to close it out with that. I mean, that covers all the guardrails. So we talked about talent acquisition in the draft and free agency. The draft stuff we'll probably refer back to later because the draft is coming up and it's a big one. They have a lot of picks. Talent retention we talked about. We talked about their key positions and how they should communicate, their coaching philosophy, how to get extra competitive advantages, how they should run the salary cap, and how they should keep learning. So to end it, I was actually wanted to know, first of all, what do you guys think of the overall template? There might be some stuff you agree or disagree with more or less, but as an overall general template for how they should kind of run their organization, do you guys feel that they'd be better served to actually stick strongly to this or give up on it completely and just pivot from it?
No, I think there's some parts in here that are still good. I think there's some parts in here that they learned from. Hopefully they learned from. And there's some parts in here where you can maybe you could take it in a different direction and it could still work. So it'd be a sub of that, So I don't know.
That might have happened if they're actually following their philosophy of learning from themselves. And what did you say right up top, Mike? You said his quote was constantly question the efficacy of your belief system and try to uncover the value where it's not readily apparent. So, and essentially, like they're saying, like constantly question your own process. So maybe they have changed these. Maybe they've looked at these and been like, yeah, maybe they did exactly what you just said. And they're like, some of these we need to change. But
and some they stuck with, but they made amendments too.
My biggest thing is with this team right now, and you having this draft coming up, you have to find the diamond in the rough. Me and Chad have had multiple conversations about in a draft you need 3 solid picks, no matter what position it is. They have to be solid picks.
Got to come out with 3 guys who can make a difference on your team.
Exactly.
I think in this draft we can get 2 quarterbacks.
I wouldn't go for 2 quarterbacks. I would
hang on.
I'm sorry.
I think we can get one early. Obviously, we can get one later in rounds. And I think
it's funny because it's a weak quarterback class. But when I actually look at the quarterbacks in the class, there's just not 6 top first round guys. But there's actually a long list of guys that we all know. There's actually a pretty good amount of quarterbacks that have like 3rd to 5th round kind of like.
Let me ask you this, Chad. Is there a builder quarterback in a late round?
Probably. Yeah.
I think so.
Probably.
Too.
I don't know where they're all going to fall, but if you talk about like a developmental kind of guy, people are talking about Howard. People are talking about Jackson Dart. People like everybody hates him, but I think he's going to fall way down the draft. You're looking at tools from guys like Quinn Ewers, who like had these crazy tools, but has been so inconsistent. And there's just a bunch. And I said, I wrote on Twitter today, like nobody's talking about Dylan Gabriel. And I think it's kind of weird because although his college production was incredible, and like I could see somebody taking a pick around the time we took DTR on a guy like Dylan Gabriel and just being like, he played so much, like he could probably step in as a backup now without a lot of like training time.
So Gregory says that Milroe's got those Trump hands, and
I heard he does a little hands.
Little hands, and that was who else was that? As a Pittsburgh Steeler, who else had small hands? That
Pickett.
everybody was.
Yeah,
Pickett.
Pickett.
and
Kenny
and
Pickett, yes,
Teddy,
that's right.
Teddy Bridgewater. The two I can really remember were Kenny Pickett and Teddy Bridgewater, who basically Teddy's thing was like they used to jokingly call him Teddy Two Gloves because he would wear he always wore gloves on both hands because he couldn't grip the football well enough.
I bet you that boy sit down when he pee. I bet you that boy sits down.
I remember
that boy sits down when he pees.
I had a friend that caught that nickname and like never let it go. Teddy
Two
Two
hands.
Gloves. And then
Two
and yeah, Kenny Pickett. People were saying like Kenny Pickett. I remember the first meme was like the hamburger commercial from Burger King where he's got like the little tiny hands.
Oh yeah.
He's like, I want to eat that hamburger, but I got these little hands.
Lou, what's up, buddy? I will not
remember
tag
that.
you in this.
It's funny, Chad. I
Promise.
remember that.
So then what do you think, Mike? Are you more on like this is a pretty good template, it could use some adjustments, but they should stick to it, or more like I don't think they're going to get good under this, they should bail on it and come up with just a different plan?
I think there are multiple things that this obviously needs to change because this is from 2020. I think you should change some things and move forward with most of it.
I agree. I think this is in principle, good organizations do have these kind of guidelines. I agree with you though, that if they're not constantly going back and like amending it here and there, then they're probably not doing themselves justice. And then the last question was like, is there any additional like guardrail you would add to one of these sections, or is there a certain one that you think they haven't really stuck to that they need to emphasize? If you had the choice to either add one or go back to one and like highlight it and be like this.
If you had to
What
add
do you
one,
think?
never guarantee a contract that big. That's my biggest one. Honestly, I mean, you look at what it brought you. I think with a lot of these players in this league, listen, a lot of these players in this league, after they get money, they decline. They don't give a shit. They got this guaranteed contract. They're out there to play a game that they supposedly love, but now it's for the money, dude. Money Manziel.
Look,
It essentially says maintain flexibility as long as possible, be able to exit after 2 years with no dead money. The asterisk is unless it's a veteran quarterback. So you would take that part out and be like, even if it is a veteran quarterback, just never do that.
Nail on the head.
Yep.
Nail on the head.
I would take it.
And going to what you said, Mike, if anything, this guardrail that was laid out, other teams, it's funny because it's what it says, is the last thing on it. And the last thing says learn from other sports organizations. And if ain't all these teams paying attention to us right now because of this disaster contract we just had with Deshaun Watson,
they're learning from us.
that little gray thing at the bottom that says learn from other sports organizations, if they're not paying attention, I guarantee they're paying attention now. No pun intended. No more guaranteed money.
Okay. I mean, to give you so I do think they should stick with this. I agree they should stick with it. They should amend it as their data starts to suggest this one thing we thought was important isn't so important. And then for the final guardrail, I wouldn't add one. You could. There's some ideas I had. The bigger thing is like under talent acquisition, and I think it's only under draft. It should be under both. It says study the play, study the data, study the character. And I'm pretty sure somewhere on there it says something like player evaluation. And it talks about like psychology. What is it? I've kind of lost track of where it's on here. Oh, it's like under competitive advantages, psychology and information gathering. I would pair that with the word character up in talent acquisition, and I would say you should highlight the psychology and finding as much information on these characters as you can. It needs to be listed under the draft, under free agency, under player retention. It's very clear that they have not taken
pretty much have a psych eval on every player.
It's just like, I mean, look at the situation with Watson's come up over and over. We talked about them bringing in Perry on Winfrey. We talked about Kadarius Toney. Like, gather your information. Like when they brought in Kadarius Toney, like how many people did they talk to from the Chiefs organization and say, hey, you guys cut this kid. We're thinking about bringing him in. How many of his former teammates or his former coaches did you say, like, does this kid, it went wrong, but does he have a shot? And then when you look at the Watson thing,
Didn't Kadarius come from KC to us?
Yeah. He was
Maybe
he
there-
was
he
put
was
on the practice
a
squad.
giant. He was a
Hey.
giant. He was a chief, and then he's with us.
Right. And they were like, Kansas City was like, sorry, man, we feel so bad for you guys. Because of the hunt thing,
Right.
we're gonna go ahead and give you a Kadarius thing.
Yeah, take
And we're
Kadarius.
like, sweet. What the fuck, man?
Yeah, but I think that would be my big highlight. Is like a lot of these things about building your team and picking up guys important. If you're not looking at the psychology and the character of players and gathering every information you can on them from like their peers and their coaches, like you're missing. And when I talk to people that were like, I was against the Deshaun trade and it wasn't based on the allegations, when they say it's because I just thought that he wasn't going to be able to handle the pressure and stuff like that, I think that's something that they like pushed aside or convinced themselves wasn't important because of the on the field potential talent. And I just don't think you can do that. I think you have to look at, if you're going to look at quarterbacks this year, like do a deep dive on their character, how hard they're going to work and how much they can handle coming here and getting things done. It seemed like they didn't do it.
This is why I would pass on Shedeur Sanders. What you're just talking.
Yeah, they have to do their homework. Like if he's a problem, they got to know. But like I love Baker Mayfield, but there was a lot of character flags about the fact that
hang on,
he wasn't going to listen.
Hang on, because everybody's like Shedeur. We need Shedeur Sanders here. No, we don't. And you know what? I don't know why. Shedeur might be an outstanding young man and a great quarterback. You know what I don't want with Shedeur is his daddy's baggage.
Not only that, you got to look at the.
Because that will be a problem. It's been proven.
Oh, yeah.
Proof's in the pudding. It's happened before. OBJ's daddy crying, bitching at Baker Mayfield. Do we want that again? I don't.
I want to hit this comment real quick.
And just with that being said, that's why I would pass on Shedeur Sanders.
John Bader.
We have enough problems. We have enough problems here in Cleveland.
John Bader on YouTube says perhaps they go veteran quarterback route. Browns promoted Bill Musgraves today, who was with Derek Carr when he was a Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
I believe they will have a lot of options. And that's another
Derek's
thing.
not available yet, but Derek's one of those guys like Geno Smith, Derek Carr. He's one of those guys that like a lot of people think will get cut for cap reasons for a team that's ready to start over. This is where having a bad quarterback class is tough because a lot of people release those guys because they think there's a free agent that's better or there's a quarterback in the draft they can get. The tough thing is if you're the Seahawks picking like 20-something, or even if you're the Saints picking wherever they're picking, like 8th, are you going to cut your starting quarterback knowing that there's not going to be a quarterback sitting there for you to pick? It's a bummer because those guys are guys that might normally be cap casualties. And I think they're both higher on my board than like a Kirk Cousins or a Joe Flacco or another guy that might actually be available.
I really think that this draft class coming up, to me, is going to be more
set up for the Browns.
No, I think this quarterback draft class is very weak. Okay. But with that being said, I think it's more going to swing more towards you can get some crushing star running backs that could be franchise players for years. Yeah. And I really think that this draft class is more running back elite than quarterback elite.
There's a lot of running backs in this one. And they're going to go. What's interesting about the running backs is there's maybe one that will end up in the first round, could be 2, but like
James,
it's spread out. There's a couple 1s, a couple 2s, a couple 3s, and then some late rounders. But it's funny because when I hear from like, I just heard a big interview with Mel Kiper and he talked, and we got a lot of draft talk coming up, but just in general, he's like, yeah, it's a weak quarterback class, but it's a deep quarterback draft with like secondary guys. And he was also talking about how he has kind of like an interesting take on this draft because it's a very high, like first 6 guys for him. And then the 2 quarterbacks. And so it's like there's 8 guys worth picking up top. And then he's like, and then there's nothing for the rest of the first round. I would not want like a mid to late first round pick. He's like, but then when you get to the second round, he's like, I feel like there's 2 rounds worth of second round talent there. So like it's a very deep day 2, but a really, really shallow day 1. And like that might do some favors for the Browns since they have a high second and then 2/3 and then a really high first. They can get a quarterback or one of those elite guys. So like
I,
if there's a year to have these kind of picks, they might have accidentally stumbled on it despite the weak quarterback class.
right. We got about 4 minutes left. I want to hit two of Gregory's comments here real quick. He says, I don't understand why you would give somebody that big of a bag without seeing them on the field. At least when they did it with Jerry, they had a body of work that was recent. And then he says, I would love to see Judkins in an orange and brown uniform.
I'd love to see either of those running backs from Ohio State in an orange and brown uniform. I love Henderson.
Yeah. I think the Jerry Jeudy deal worked out for us well. And I praise Andrew Berry for that. I think we all do.
People were mad about it.
But then here's the thing: like, who are you going to bring in to throw to him? That's the biggest ordeal.
It's
Right.
funny. It's funny, Chad, because you are right. People were mad about it, but then he was catching
You weren't
touchdowns.
mad about it.
They were catching touchdowns. They're like, "Oh, he's the greatest ever, man."
Right.
I'm glad. That's them fans, bro. They're like this.
People were like, well, it's only worth trading because you gave up almost nothing. But they were pissed that we extended him. Imagine he was the sixth highest receiving. He was sixth highest in receiving out of all receivers this year. Imagine what we would have had to pay him if we had just brought him in on his 5th-year option and did not extend him.
Right.
He'd probably be gone because now he's looking at, $25+ million a year all of a sudden. And the fact that they gave him 16 or so and signed him for 3 extra years, like, oh.
John says, Cable Johnson, running back from Iowa, I believe fits this scheme the very best.
This will be a scheme fit running back. There's going to be certain guys that other teams aren't going to find value in that the Browns will, because they're going to be guys who can make one big cut and do this zone scheme. Chubb was incredible at it.
Yes. So Gregory says people were salty about the Njoku extension as well, and that's what, $13 million a year I think he's making.
I'm still slightly salty about it.
So am I. So am I, because the guy's hit or miss. The guy could make elite catches, but when it's a wide open pass, the guy drops it every freaking time.
And you take your risk. If you're going to sign the guy early before he actually explodes, like, you're going to risk. And Njoku wasn't a giant risk because he wasn't a miss. He actually has come around, but he's been hurt a lot. He only works in some offenses, and other times the way they're playing, he's just a blocker. And
Right.
so, like, yeah, if you're going to sign early, yeah, you're going to take some misses. But when you hit,
that's why we should keep it Akins.
I like Akins.
maybe
like
Eagles
Whitehart
won't
as
be
well.
around for more than one more, I don't think.
I think Whitehart might stay here. I think we could keep
Now
Blake
that Whitehart was something to see, man. He had a couple great catches, and I'm gonna bounce real quick to Njoku. The one thing that I do like about Njoku is his off-season working. He's not out here kicking it. He's out here actually working to be better next year. So I'm sure he's aware of. I'm sure he seems like the guy that goes and looks and goes, man, I caught the 2-point conversion. I got flipped in the air and landed on my back. Got it. I got a bullet over the middle and I dropped it. I know he's working on that. Because I
Before you go
watched.
along, Sam,
He used to have really
Greg's
bad
got a
drop
question for
problems.
you.
He's gotten much better.
he says it feels like his route running kind of fell off a little bit this year. What are your thoughts?
I think he was playing hurt.
He was playing hurt, but also if you watched the Buffalo Bills play and you saw how they execute a tight end versus how this group used to execute tight end before, it's a very different thing. Like, look at Dalton Kincaid, even right now in Buffalo.
We
Dawson Knox,
we got scheme problems here. We got to fix the scheme.
You're right. He was injured. I don't think people realized how much time he missed this year. He's playing a lot of this year hurt. The thing is, though, he's so big, he's so athletic. He played through almost setting himself on fire. It's kind of crazy how much time he misses for other little things. But when he is out there, he's a game breaker. I was only upset about the contract extension because I just feel like at the time, and I was wrong, at the time, he had just recently been asking for a trade, and that's not somebody I would be looking to extend. But it worked out. He ended up staying here. He's been happy here. If they could keep him on the field and they go back to the old way they used to use tight ends, I think he'll have another really valuable year. We'll see whether he earns another contract, though, because he's coming up to the end of his last one.
Well, and all that will be dictated based upon, I mean, Kevin's system and what kind of quarterback. Because for Njoku to work correctly, you have to have under the center quarterback.
Yeah, we know
We're
that.
bringing in Shador Sanders, no doubt.
Oh, bold prediction
we'll
by
see how
Chad
he
right there on the
executes.
show live. You guys heard it first.
I'm just
Write it down. Write it down. No,
I got
but
about 5% battery life, so I'll probably just disappear any
No,
minute
you're
now.
good.
So get ready
We're
for
gonna end
that.
it anyways. Chad, if you want to move that stuff to next week, we could do that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sam, thank you for joining us tonight, dude.
absolutely. Thanks for
Much
having me, guys.
appreciated. You're
Nice
my-
to meet you.
you're my
Nice to
dude.
meet you in person here, kind of, Chad. We're
Yeah,
like,
it's been real. It's been
Kinda.
real, Sam.
Yeah.
Only 2,000 miles away, but hey.
that'll work.
But yeah, hey, if you guys enjoyed the show tonight, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, share on all social media platforms. We have 2 weekly shows. Sam's our Saturday guy. We go live at 10 in the morning. And then every Tuesday at 7:30, it's me, Angel, and Chad. I said that right. I'm so thankful.
Yes. No, you're good.
But yeah, join us, like, subscribe, share, and we much appreciate you guys. And thank you for joining us. But until then, we will see you Saturday with Sam, Angel, and myself.
Always go Browns, man.
Yes, until then,
Love to the land, man.
love to the land.
Stick to your guardrails.
Stick to your
Don't waver.
Guardrails are important, apparently.
Watch those bumpers. Watch those.
Yeah,
Don't you go off track.
it's like going bowling and you get the bumpers put up.
Yeah.
Next time we're going to talk a little bit about Shrine Bowl recap, Senior Bowl recap, who was there, talk about the new coaches coming in and what they're going to be doing. And we got a lot of good offensive off-season stuff coming in with the draft too. So